Everybody. My name's Heath Rose from the University of Oxford, and I'm just here in 5 minutes to tell you about things they don't tell you about your students' future language needs, and I'm going to do this in 4 charts. So let's get started. So first of all, the chart 1 is really just to communicate that English is a global language dominated by L2 users, and this is going to affect your students' future language needs. And I'm going to show this chart that's adapted by the work of David Graddle when he spoke at the TESOL convention in 2014. Here we can see first language users as they've grown over a 100-year period from the 1950s to 2050 predicted. And we can see some global languages like Arabic in terms of first language speakers increasing quite rapidly, French following a similar pattern, Spanish on a similar trend to French, and then English. And so actually there doesn't seem anything remarkable about English, particularly when we compare it to other languages such as Mandarin Chinese here in the red. However, the key here is that we're not talking about first language users, that global language use in English is dominated by second language speakers. And so in order to represent these in the graph, we have to squish our chart a little bit, and to look at all users of English looks something like this. And if we consider where that dotted line is here, where we are now, actually we've only just begun to enter a period of continued rapid growth of English as a global language. So this is quite exciting for people who are in the English language teaching industry. So chart 2 then, I want to show that students are likely to need lingua franca English in their future. And I'm going to use the example of Japan, seeing as that's where this conference is taking place. And so in this chart, we could have looked at a number of different aspects, but just choosing who is coming to Japan, and so who students, non-Japanese speakers, whose students are likely to engage with, we can see that predominantly the people that they will come in maybe international people they will come in contact with in Japan are predominantly from countries like Korea, China, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Asian others. And actually, even when we take out Europe, there's only really a small wedge of so-called native English speakers. And so, this chart is to show that if students are using English in the Japanese context, so not even if they're going abroad, they're more likely going to use it in a lingua franca context. Okay, third chart I want to show is that when we talk about English as a global language, we're talking about global Englishes and not a standard English. That is, not everybody speaks the same. I've discussed this with my colleague Nicola Galloway in our 2015 book, looking at 4 ways that English has spread through history, through settler colonization, through slavery, through trade and exploitation colonies, and through globalizations. And all of the different ways that English has spread and mixed with speakers of other language have created different types of Englishes. And even within these categories of native Englishes, or nativized Englishes, or learned Englishes, we see really vast differences. So really, when we're talking in a global sense, there's no such thing as a single standard. And this is where the most of the growth has come from. Okay, so what does all this mean then? This brings me to the final chart. What are the implications for language teaching? I've summed this up in what's called the GELT framework, Global English's Language Teaching Framework, which makes a distinction with what language teaching should look like in the future to the kind of traditional patterns that we see in traditional ELT. And so I'm not going to go through all of these, but you can see, we need to move away from goals of learning of native-like proficiency to multi-competent users of the language. The needs have changed. They're no longer inner circle defined, so American or British English defined, but globally defined. The target interlocutor, so who they're going to be using English with in the future, are no longer dominated by native English speakers, but all English users. And so we can see in different dimensions in English language teaching for the future of global ELT, there are aspects that need to be changed. And we've summed these up in proposals for change in ELT based on Global English's research. And these are an increased exposure to lingua franca use and world Englishes in the language curriculum, emphasizing respect for multilingualism in the ELT, raising awareness of how English is used around the world, raising awareness of different strategies that students will need to communicate with people of varying sociocultural backgrounds, emphasizing respect for diverse culture and identity in ELT, and changing English teaching hiring practices to value what non-native English so-called non-native English speaking teachers bring to the classroom. Okay, so that is the end of my talk, The Future of English in 4 charts. I've left you with some discussion questions for you to contemplate of how this applies to your current teaching contexts. Thank you.